Good to see everybody again.
Good to see you.
Thank you. It's been a while, and just to make sure that, if more people join, I'll try to remember to say it again. Next week we are not meeting. Unfortunately, we're starting now, and we're going to have to skip next week and then restart again the following week. Okay, so that's the schedule. And now we're going to try to figure out a good place to start. I think that the best thing would be for us to start on 13b2. Yeah, you're on mute, Bill, if you want to say.
Sorry. Yeah, I marked our last of our discussion at the very end of the first three lines in the left-hand column, right after, and at the bidding of Mordecai, Esther did. I think that's where we stopped. We may have stopped a little bit earlier, or we may have gone a little bit further.
No, we went further. We definitely spoke about the next paragraph.
Okay.
I started talking about the idea that in contemporary times, the idea of having women help women deal with their intimate issues of menstruation and so on is something that's a pretty recent phenomenon in terms of being institutionalized. And so we did definitely talk about that paragraph.
Okay.
That paragraph basically is saying that Esther was a dutiful, obedient Jewish woman. She followed all the rules. The very end of that paragraph brings up a kind of a troubling, questionable kind of situation where we have the Talmud say that she was having relations with two men. She had relations with Achashverosh, and then she would have relations with her Jewish husband Mordecai. And how we wrap our minds around that? How do we evaluate how that could be? That here it's just put out blandly as simply she would go to the mikveh, and that would sort of be the separation between her impure experience with that that guy, and then the loving, wonderful union that she had with Mordecai. We'll have to look at that a little bit later. It's going to come up some more. So we're going to put that off on hold for now. But just, note that our eyebrows have been raised by this story, or by this statement. And there's a long note 18. We're not going to look at it right now. So my suggestion is we start right after that, where it says the Megillah continues. Okay, and here we go again with the reading of all of the verses within the story of Megillat Esther, and we're coming to the next episode. The next episode is, as the verse begins to tell us, the plot that is hatched against Achashverosh, and Mordecai comes to the rescue. Right, so that's the next episode. Okay, so who's going to read for us? Going once, going twice.
Fine.
All right.
I stand at the ready.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. The Megillah continues. In those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigtan and Teresh became angry, and they planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus.
Okay, let's look at note 19.
Note 19 is from Esther 2:21.
Yeah, it's not a pleasure. A short note. Just that's all.
It's nice to have that every once in a while.
Every once in a while, a short note. Good. So this is so now, and like I say, Mordecai comes into the picture, and he overhears it. He reports it to Esther. Esther reports it in his name to Achashverosh. It's written down in the book of records, and Bigtan and Teresh are punished. Okay, so now before we go into it, the Gemara.
The Gemara notes, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, The Holy One, blessed is he, caused a master to be angry with his servants in order to fulfill the will of a righteous man. And who was this righteous man? Joseph. As it says, and there was with us a Hebrew youth, etc. And conversely, the Holy One, blessed is he, caused servants to be angry with their master in order to perform a miracle for a righteous man. And who was this righteous man? Mordecai, as it is written, and the matter became known to Mordecai, etc.
Okay, so there's a comparison here of two stories. And in terms of how you read the words, you have to give a little inflection, right? In the first story, the holy top of the right-hand column, the Holy One, blessed be he, caused a master to be angry with his servants. And now, in this other story, and conversely, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the top, conversely, the Holy Blessed One caused servants to be angry with their master, right? So we flip it around. And that's part of the Megillah story, right? The whole Megillah story is about flipping things around. The Nahafochu, everything was turned upside down, right? It's a topsy-turvy holiday. So these two stories are put next to each other. The first one is that God caused a person in power, a master, somebody in a powerful position, to be angry with his servants. Who is that? That's Pharaoh. Pharaoh is the master, and he gets angry at his butler and his baker. Right? And they get thrown into jail, and then they have dreams, and then Joseph is also in jail. So Joseph comes and he tells them the answer of their dreams. And of course, the baker gets hanged or executed, and the butler gets restored to serving Pharaoh, just as Joseph had explained, right? And that sets up then when the verse says, as it says, and there was with us a Hebrew youth. That's the butler talking to Pharaoh when Pharaoh has his dreams, and Pharaoh can't get anybody to give him a satisfactory explanation. Finally, 2 years after he had promised Joseph that he would speak up on his behalf, forgot about it for 2 years. And now this is happening. And finally, the butler says, I have to admit it, right? Et chata'ai ani mazkir hayom. I have to make mention of my own failings. And you threw me into prison. But there was a really talented Hebrew who knew how to interpret dreams. So maybe he can help Pharaoh. So this is the machinations that God is engineering for the sake of actualizing the overall plan that God has, right? And then, of course, later on, that's exactly what Joseph says to his brothers. You thought that you were going to get rid of me, but no, God actually had other plans for me. So this is an expansion of that idea. God is pulling the strings behind the scenes. And the whole story of the fact that Pharaoh gets angry at his servants and throws them into jail, that was actually had nothing to do with the servants, had nothing to do with Pharaoh. It was all just a way to make the steps that were necessary happen in order to finally get Joseph to stand before Pharaoh. Okay, so that's the complicated way that real life has to be played out in order to get these things done. So that's the Joseph story. And now says, this is Rabbi Yochanan is the original teacher of this. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. He says, and now in the Megillah, we have a similar situation, but the real life context is reversed. Bigtan and Teresh are plotting against the master. The servants are plotting against the ruler, right? So it's opposite, but it's really still the same idea. It's not really about them trying to get power or whatever they want to do with it's all about getting Mordechai to be in a position of appreciation, right? Because Mordechai is the one who is going to blow their cover and be able to get credit then for foiling the plot. And that's important, that we need, so that Mordechai afterwards will be able to save the day with Esther. So this is the way that they're looking at it. So v'na'afoch, right? The mirror image of the story that we have in the Torah. What can I say? It's a kind of a picture that has a lot of Swiss cheese holes in it, but nevertheless it has a certain charm to it. It begs the question, how much control does God have over human affairs, and how much control does God not have over human affairs? I mean, even saying this whole thing, the consistency is impossible to maintain, right? Because God had to arrange it this way so that Mordechai would then get credit, so that therefore then Achashverosh would be able to, what do you mean? If Bigtan and Teresh are puppets in God's hands, then everybody is a puppet in God's hands, and that none of this should happen. And Haman is a puppet in God's hands. So it begs that question, but it puts it into a very artful kind of way of looking at it, where basically it's a very optimistic perspective. Right? In the end, what it looks like, things are messed up. It looks like terrible things are going to happen. Don't worry, it's really part of a bigger plan, and it will all work out. Right? Okay. So what was going on with Bigtan and Teresh?
The Gemara now relates the plan of Bigtan and Teresh to poison the king, and how Mordechai was able to discover it. Rabbi Yochanan said,
again, this is Rabbi Yochanan, clearly a major source of teachings about how the rabbis looked at the story.
Rabbi Yochanan said, Bigtan and Teresh were two Tarsians, and they were conversing in the Tarsian language and saying to each other within earshot of Mordechai, "From the day this woman came to the palace, we have not gotten any sleep. Come, let us place poison in the bowl from which Achashverosh drinks, so that he should die." But they did not know that Mordechai was of those who sat in the chamber, in the chamber of hewn stone, and he knew the 70 languages of the world. Mordechai therefore understood everything they said and told Esther to warn Achashverosh about their plot to kill him.
Okay, so now let's back up and see exactly what's this extra pillar background story that Rabbi Yochanan imagines is going on, because the verse in the Megillah doesn't tell us anything about what was going on. Was there a grievance that they had? Was this just simply a power play? Did they notice a chance that they felt that it was too good to pass up? Or what was there a real complaint? So what is then of course that's one part of the question, and the other part of the question is Mordechai is there. How is it that Mordechai is able to find out what they're doing, and how is it that they're not concerned with Mordechai being there? Okay, so let's answer the second question first. That's simple. They were talking in a language they thought nobody else would understand. They weren't talking Persian. They were talking Tarsian, whatever that is. And therefore, they felt that they were safe to be able to whisper to each other, that even if somebody would hear them, nobody would know what they were talking about. But Mordechai did know, and we'll talk about why Mordechai knew later. That, of course, brings up, a political possibility. They're not, native Persians. Maybe they want to do an independence rebellion. Maybe they want to do a coup and have the Tarsians become the head of the empire. There are all kinds of possibilities like that. Those are not made explicit here. What is made explicit is this phrase here: from the day that this woman came to the palace, we have not gotten any sleep. What does that mean? What do we think that means? Is that an observation? Is that a complaint?
Well,
Who's
in
it
the
against?
context, it seems to be a complaint.
Okay, who are they
We didn't get any
complaining against?
sleep, and it's
Are they
and it's
compl-
and
Yeah,
it
go
and
ahead.
it's somebody else's fault. It's Esther's fault, and it's the king's fault for listening to Esther in
Okay,
some
so
way.
let's look at 24 for a second. Not for a second, it's a long note. So
It's a
it's
long
not
note.
like,
2 seconds.
not like note 19. What can I tell you?
Literally, we have not seen any sleep in our eyes. Ahasuerus was infatuated with Esther and engaged in frequent relations with her. As a result, this shows a rather interesting imagination. He was continually thirsty, and his attendants, Bigtan and Teresh, were constantly busy providing him with drink. That's Rashi's take on this. The Megillah describes the duties of Bigtan and Teresh as guardians of the threshold, which could also mean guardian of the bowl. That is, those charged with providing the king with drink. That's Maharsha's take. Alternatively, Bigtan and Teresh were indeed palace guards. However, since the king's personal attendants were not on hand at night when he sought privacy with his wife, it was these guards who would be summoned to wait on the king's nocturnal needs.
Okay, so they're complaining, and as you said, Bill, there are two people implicated in the complaint, right? There's the king, and there's that woman.
Oh, that woman.
Right, that woman. Who did we have back in recent history that was called that woman?
Monica Lewinsky.
Was Monica? And what about also was it also in England with
Profumo? You going back to the Profumo?
not Profumo, before that? You know, when the guy who abdicated.
Yeah. Wallace Simpson. Yeah.
Right. She was also, I think, called that woman.
That woman. Yeah.
Right, because she was a commoner.
A commoner and a divorcee. That was the main
And a
thing.
divorcee. That was the real bad thing. Right. So it's it's this
and an American. So she had 3 strikes. Three strikes against
around. Absolutely. But yes, the point is there's a kind of a contempt in the reference, but also contempt if what kind of man is it that's going to be hanging out with that woman, right? So it's a contempt, spills out over onto him. So one thing is simply that they lose respect, but now it's also what they're complaining about is that their own convenience, their own comfort is being taken away from them because the king is asking them all the time for things, and it's often what we see this all the time in those British shows, right? The person comes into to the manor, and the woman that becomes the new person who runs the manor or the palace, and all the servants don't like it the way it used to be. We used to put the napkins on the right. Now we have to put the napkins on the left. And this and that. So there's this kind of like petty kvetching, but it's really important to the downstairs people. So something is going on here, and of course, what we have also is sexual innuendo, which always spices things up a little bit. And this is, again, just to say things that we all know. The sexual activities of the king can be both a source of envy and a source of contempt, right? Look at this guy, he's so macho and he's so powerful and he can do anything he wants. So there's a kind of an envy, that people complain about. And then there's also the idea of being weak, right? Men in general have that problem, right? What does it say about me that I have fallen for this woman, right? What does it say about him that he has? So there's a lot of ambivalent stuff going on here, and what it's supposed to lead to for Bigtan and Teresh is let's get rid of this guy, and obviously we'll get rid of her as well, right? Or whatever. Okay, so they don't know that Mordechai is listening in, or they know that they don't care that he's listening in because they don't know that he knows their language. How come he knows their language?
He speaks a lot of languages.
How does it? Why? Why? Because in his spare time, he had this Berlitz app or something like that. So look at note 25. Right?
Note 25.
Mordechai was of those who sat in the chamber of hewn stone. What is this chamber of hewn stone? Go ahead.
This was the room in the temple area that was the seat of the great Sanhedrin, the high court of 71 judges, of whom Mordecai was a member.
Now 26.
And 26, from Menachot the Sanhedrin, state that knowledge of the 70 languages was essential to qualify as a member of the Sanhedrin.
Wow.
Okay. So the idea being the Sanhedrin was the supreme court of the land, and we're picturing Mordechai as being alive and a leader before the Babylonian destruction of the temple, and then going into exile into Babylonian and Persian control. So he was a member of the rabbinic elite. He was part of the high court. Since he was part of the high court, he had to know every single language. Why would a member of the high court have to know every single language?
Because the Jews were all over the place.
So,
Jews dispersed.
Yeah.
They had to know the language of wherever they landed, wherever they were in exile.
Well, so get the Berlitz to translate for you. Get Google Translate.
Well, they wanted to understand the problems of the Jews in different places. They had to know their language.
So it goes beyond that. It's not simply that without knowing a language, you're at a disadvantage of understanding a situation, a culture, and so on. But since they are judges, Geraldine.
When someone else translates for you, you have to rely on the fact that they're doing it accurately.
Right.
And if the person who's translating wants to convey something else, he might not do that.
Right. So it's very tricky. Translation, of course, is an art. There is no such thing as 100% accurate translation because every language has its own nuances and so on, and everybody's human. So I did legal translation for a while. It was tough. It was a very hard responsibility. The person starts speaking, they go on for 20 minutes, and then it's about Russia. They just told, it's like, how do you translate what everybody is exactly saying? And that's the point. They're judges. So it's not just that they have to know what's going on in the world and have to know what's going on in every Jewish community. They're adjudicating cases. And when the cases come before them, they have to be absolutely sure that they understand what each person is saying. Because otherwise, as Geraldine says, they're really at the mercy of the quality of the translation, which can be even unintentionally faulty or intentionally faulty, right? They could be
even the intonation.
Yeah.
Even the intonation of the way it's explained.
Right. I mean, we talk about this every time we study Torah. Every time we study, we pick up the Eitz Chaim, or just this morning we're looking at every time we look at these texts that are in Hebrew and Aramaic and so on, the translations are endless. It's a little bit of this nuance, a little bit of this nuance. What's the syntax? That's really the way it's supposed to be. So that's why, if you wanted to be a Supreme Court judge, quote unquote, and if you wanted to be a member of the Sanhedrin, you had to. Now, clearly, this is mythic, but the idea was that the standard had to be that you had to be directly capable of knowing what anybody's coming to say to you, which is a tremendously important value, certainly aspirationally speaking, very, very important. You need to be able to hear what the person says. How many times do we we disregard what people say because we don't really want to hear what they say, or we're predisposed to listen to one type of person and not to another type of person. And we don't even want to know about the nuances or the tone of voice that the person is using. Yeah, Josie.
Not to be political, but I got stuck in a cab with a driver who was on one very extreme end of today's politics.
Uh-huh.
He started telling me what's really happening in the world.
Good.
And I'm in the back seat. I'm strapped in. He's driving. I can't argue with him. Yeah, depends on what your point of view is.
Right. That would have been a time where it would have been good if you didn't speak the same language.
Right.
You were speaking English, both of you, I think, right? But
Oh,
you weren't,
yeah.
but you weren't speaking the same language. You weren't speaking the same language. Yeah. All right. So that's what happened here, is that Mordechai, unbeknownst to them,
Knows.
was this multilingual expert. So therefore, he was able to understand. Let's just also pause for a second. According to this picture, and again, part of what we're unwrapping in this is this back and forth like this, like I say, upstairs, downstairs, master, servant, power, powerful person, less powerful person. Mordechai has in a certain way has had his ups and downs, right? Mordechai, like the Jewish people, has been at the top, a Supreme Court justice, a member of the Sanhedrin, leader of the Jewish people. And now, yes, it's true that he's within the king's court, but everything about his life is shaky, vulnerable. He's at the king's pleasure. Will he be able to change things? Will he be able to look out for his own people and their interests and their safety? This is the part that, again, there's this run-through theme that the rabbis are constantly injecting into our story, so that we should appreciate the stress and the tension that this seemingly childish kind of story is really, really all about. So Mordechai is not seen by these people as being of any significance, right? He's certainly not a threat to them. He's a nobody, right, as far as they're concerned. And that's what's important. He has to be a nobody in order for him to be able to succeed. Okay.
The conversation between Bigtan and Teresh continued. One said to the other, "But my post and your post are not the same. How then can we carry out our plan?" The other said to him, "I will guard my post and your post." And thus it is written, and the matter was investigated, and it was found out that they were not found at their posts.
Okay, so they're working hard to help each other out. I'll punch your card so that you'll get credit for being where you have to be. A little subterfuge, and then the investigation comes out. That's why the verse says "Vayivu kasha davar," and the matter was looked into. What do you have to look into it? You just we have it the report that they were plotting. The answer is no. We have to see, did their alibi stand up? Did it not stand up? So all of this is what's happening. Okay, good. Megillah continues.
The Megillah continues. After these things. After what? The Gemara inquires. After what? What is the verse conveying by connecting Haman's ascension to power specifically to the preceding events recorded in the Megillah? The Gemara answers. Rava said, only after the Holy One, blessed is he, created a remedy for the affliction did he send the affliction. For Reish Lakish said, the Holy One, blessed is he, does not smite Israel unless he has created a remedy for them beforehand. As it says, when I heal Israel, then the iniquity of Ephraim will be revealed. That is, only then will they be punished. In the case of the other nations of the world, it is not so. Rather, God smites them and only afterwards does he create a remedy, as it says, and Hashem will smite Egypt, smiting and healing.
Right? The order is smiting and then healing.
And healing.
So, hi, Merle, what's going on there? So, okay. So we have now this distinction between what happens with God treating us and the way God treats the rest of the world. So the way God treats the rest of the world, according to this picture, is it's all proceeding as things go along, right? Event A happens, that causes event B to happen, that causes event C to happen. If somebody does something wrong, then there will be punishment to follow. If somebody then repents, then there will be healing to follow that. Everything works on that kind of straightforward, down the line, temporal cause and effect. Now we have the same idea in a different form here, but the same idea that we had before, right? That God is engineering certain things to happen ahead of time in order for something to happen later. So the cause and effect is backwards. Because I want that thing to happen later, that's causing me now to make certain things happen earlier. Okay. Similarly here, God says, I know that I'm going to be engaged in putting the Jewish people under stress. How am I going to get them out of that stress? I need to have the plan A, the exit plan to get out of the stress, to get out of the problem. I need to have that prepared ahead of time, right? We kept on, all during this miserable year and a half. He talked about how much could we have planned ahead of time, to know about a pandemic. There were people that were warning about the possibilities of a pandemic for years. If you prepare ahead of time, then when it finally happens, you're in position to mitigate the problem, or all of the natural stuff that's happening, all of the disasters and the hurricane problems and so on and so forth. If you plan ahead of time, what should we do? Where should we build? What kind of services should be provided? Where, do we get everything ready ahead of time? There are eventualities that we can foresee. So this is what is claimed here. That kind of care, that kind of extra thought is given by God to the Jewish people. So that even though in the end we get clobbered again and again by all kinds of terrible things, so we might think that God is our worst enemy, actually that's not the case. Actually, the situation is that God always prepares the solution, the salvation, the rescue beforehand, so that then when the trouble comes, that resource is available. So what happened over here? After those things, in other words, after Mordechai gets credit for saving the king's life, then we can bring the bad guy in, Haman, who will now start causing trouble for the Jewish people. Haman will cause trouble for the Jewish people, but we already have Mordechai in our back pocket, so that Mordechai and Esther, of course, will be able to thwart his plan. We didn't have Mordechai and Esther set up advantageously beforehand, then it would have been too late. Until we finally would have been able to gain the king's trust, until finally would have been able to get an entree into the king, to be, in any way to counter what Haman wanted to do, it would have been too late. We wouldn't have been able to respond quickly enough. So first, this is like a chess game. So first, God is putting these certain chess pieces in the place that right now, it's not so clear that they're so significant, but as soon as this other thing will happen, then they'll be able to be brought into play. So that's what we have here. That's the difference. I want to say, coming off of the days of awe, this is not always so obvious in our stories of the Torah. We have this amazing story of Jonah and the whale that we read on Yom Kippur afternoon. So now's not the time to go into all of the different layers of the meanings of that story. It's got so many different elements to it. But how does it start off? It starts off with God preparing the remedy before the trouble. God says to Jonah, go to Nineveh and tell them ahead of time that if they don't get their act together, they're going to get destroyed. If they do not repent, they will be destroyed. According to this a straightforward reading of what we have here in this Gemara, what is being presented, well, for the Goyim, God just lets things happen. If they mess up, God will punish them. If they repent, then God will reward them and be nice to them. So it's all, it all has to happen in its due time. What we have in the Jonah story is not that at all. And in certain sense, Jonah doesn't like that. He doesn't want that to be, right? He tries to run away from doing that. But this is what God says. I want to care for them too. This is one of the very poignant messages of the book of Yonah, is that God's mercies and God's deep caring is for every human being and every creature. God says, and the animals. What about the animals? I'm supposed to be destroying my own animals. These are my creatures. So what? Don't you get this? Why aren't you happy? I'm happy. I warned them, and they took my warning, and we averted a disaster. I didn't have to wait till afterwards. Right? Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, the Megillah continues.
The Megillah continues.
We're making good progress. We have to make some good progress because we.
With all the time we've got weeks and weeks and weeks to make up. Good heavens.
Yes.
The Megillah continues. It seemed contemptible in his eyes to lay hands on Mordecai alone.
Okay, this is we know already what this is about. This is the famous bowing episode, right? Right. So everybody is supposed to be, showing, homage to Haman, because he's this. If you look, I think 31 gives you the rest of the verse, right? Look at 31. Note 31.
The entire verse reads, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him. He set his seat above all the officers who were with him.
Right. So this is the promotion. This is where Haman gets his, dream come true. He's now, the Grand Vizier or whatever you want to call him. He's like the, he's made it, right? So that's the promotion. And then what he does is he says, okay, now I want everybody to show me due deference. And that's when Mordechai Yehudi lo yichra v'lo yishtachaver. Mordechai the Jew would not bend the knee or bow down to Haman. So then, okay, read the verse in 38. Note 38.
Note 38. The verse in its entirety reads, it seemed contemptible to him to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they told him the people of Mordecai. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the entire kingdom of Ahasuerus.
Okay. So it's not enough. It's not enough for Haman to have revenge on this one man who pushed his buttons, right? He's going to expand it. And now the Gemara goes, what kind of expansion are we talking about?
The verse mentions Mordecai, then the people of Mordecai, then all the Jews. Therefore, the Gemara expounds. Rabbi said, at first, Haman wished to destroy Mordecai alone. Then he wished to destroy the people of Mordecai as well. And who are considered the people of Mordecai? Wait for it, the rabbis. And finally, he wished to destroy all the Jews.
Right. So the people of Mordecai could have been understood as his family, but the family that the rabbis are promoting here is the family of sages. Mordecai was one of the Sanhedrin. He was part of that other kind of family. So this is, and of course, what we're going into now is an extended use of the Megillah to talk about standard anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish tropes, whether it's how people have talked about us over the years, what kinds of policies people have adopted against Jews, it comes out of here as well. The rabbis are a target because the leadership class of every people, when they're being attacked, is a target. Destroy their culture, destroy their political leadership. On Yom Kippur, when we have the section called the Martyrology. The Martyrology traditionally is about the Roman efforts to destroy the rabbinic class, to destroy all the rabbis who were trying to keep Jewish life going, and executing each rabbi for defying the Roman rules against teaching Torah, against spreading the Torah, against practicing the Torah. So, this is again a reflection of historical reality as well as a creative reading of the verse. So he wanted to destroy Mordechai as the trigger, then all of the rabbis, and then all of the Jews. Okay, here we go.
The Megillah continues, was cast pur, that is the lot. On this verse, a Baraita taught, when
Haman wanted to destroy the Jews, he said, let me cast a lot. Let me throw the dice. Let me spin the wheel. I can kill him any day. So I can't decide which day should I kill him. So he does this. And of course, that's how we get the name Purim, right? Purim means lots.
Lots.
Right? Means not lots like a lot, like, abundance, but, like a lottery, a lot, throwing the dice. So, and this is the ironic story, right? That what from Haman's point of view is absolutely arbitrary and random. I don't care when I kill it. As long as I kill the Jews, I don't care what day it is, right? So from his perspective, everything here is by chance. But what have we been hearing again and again in the rabbinic retelling of this story?
It's not a coincidence.
It's not the coincidence, not at all. I don't think so, right? It's not by chance. Everything here is fitting into a tightly designed puzzle. Okay, so he peeled poor should be translated. He cast a lot.
Oh, not a passive. Okay, you cast a lot. You cast the poor. That is a lot. On this verse, a Baraita taught, when Haman saw that the lot fell on the month of Adar, he rejoiced greatly, for he said, "The lot fell for me on the month in which Moses died." He felt this indicated that it was an unlucky month for the Jews, and he therefore felt confident that he would prevail. However, Haman did not realize that while Moses died on the 7th of Adar, he was also born on the 7th of Adar. Consequently, it was in fact not considered an inauspicious month for the Jews.
Okay, so we have a tradition that Moses died on the 7th day of Adar, right? Adar is the last month of the Jewish calendar. Nisan is the first month. Nisan is the month of Passover. Adar is the 12th month. And according to our tradition and the working of it, how you work that out is go back to 41. Note 41.
Note 41. Scripture does not state explicitly that Moses died on the 7th day of Adar, but it can be calculated using different information supplied by Scripture. Deuteronomy 34:8 states that the Jews mourned Moses for 30 days. Joshua 1:11 states that after they finished mourning Moses, they were given 3 days in which to prepare themselves to cross the Jordan River and take possession of the land of Israel. They then crossed the Jordan on the 10th day of Nisan. That's from Joshua 4:19. Thus Moses died 33 days before the 10th of Nisan, which is the 7th of Adar. That's Rashi's calculation.
Okay, so that's the calculation. How do you make a calculation like that? By paying attention to all of these little minute details that we usually completely skip over in the text. Yeah, right. Okay, so they mourned him, and then we went into the land of Israel. We get the broad picture, but we have these little tiny little extra facts that are floating around there. And there's a whole, over the years, over the generations, over the millennia, there's a whole bunch of people that this is something that they find, pleasurable, interesting, compelling to do. I'm not one of them, but I like to benefit. But I like to benefit from their work.
Yeah.
Right? Thank God that there are these wonks that actually, do this kind of like really grunty kind of work. And then, we come up with a bigger picture. Okay, so he dies on the 7th of Adar. How do we know he was born on the 7th of Adar? 42.
Note 42. Moses said to the Jews on the day of his death, I am 120 years this day. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah states that the word Hayom, this day, implies that on that day his 120 years were complete. That is, he turned 120 that day. Thus, since Moses died on the 7th of Adar, it follows that he was also born on the 7th of Adar. Again, Rashi's calculation.
So this was his birthday party. His birthday party was his funeral. So he died on the 7th of Adar, and now we also extrapolate that he was born on the 7th of Adar. So now let's go back to what the Gemara says. The Gemara says Haman was very happy to be able to, when the roulette wheel fell on the 7th of Adar, then he said, oh, this is great, because Adar is a bad luck month for the Jewish people. So I'm lucky and they're unlucky, right? Because their greatest leader, their great prophet, died in Adar. So Adar must be a bad month for the Jews, thinking about, these things in a kind of, fate and destiny and predetermined stuff. By the way, we are not exempt from that kind of thinking, except it's not Adar that we think is the bad month. What traditionally is labeled the bad month for Jews?
Cheshvan.
No. Cheshvan is a month lacking in holidays.
Right.
So it's called Mar Cheshvan, which is sort of like bitter Cheshvan, because there's no holidays to celebrate.
Doesn't that mean it's bad?
No, it's not terrible, because it also doesn't have any bad things that happened.
Okay.
It's nothing.
Av.
Yeah.
The month of Tisha B'Av, the month of the 9th of Av, that month is considered a bad month for the Jewish people, because so many terrible catastrophes happened in the month of Av. So if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, for instance, it says, if you're a Jewish businessman, try not to make a business deal in Av, because it's bad luck, right? Even though we're not supposed to believe in luck, you can't help it. This is a human quality. So Av is considered for us a dark time, not a propitious time, right? But for Haman, he thought Adar was the bad month because of Mordechai's death, because of Moshe's death. So I'm getting mixed up with all these people here.
Yeah.
So now the Gemara says, but how little did he know that Adar wasn't a bad month, because after all, Moshe was born on Adar. So let me ask you a question. But he died on Adar, didn't he? So why isn't that making it into a bad month? No, but he was born in Adar. Yeah, but he died in Adar. If we're going to accept this idea that the month can have a quality of good or bad, so, what he did die in Adar, isn't that bad? What's the message here from in this way of looking at things? What's the perspective that we're getting from this?
That death is by definition bad, and the death of a leader, at least of Moses' stature, must by definition be bad for the people he led.
But that's Haman's perspective.
Yeah.
That's Haman's perspective. What this midrash is saying is the death of somebody Name one person who doesn't die.
Hmm.
Right.
It's-
The death is going to be a death. Obviously, it's sad. They mourn Moses for 30 days. But what's outweighed by his death is the life. Look at the life he lived. Look at what this guy was born in this month, and he brought light into the world, and he brought freedom to the Jewish people, and he brought the Torah to us,
Torah.
and for generation after generation after generation. How many people here are devastated by the fact that Moses died on the? No, but the fact that Moses lived is like a gift that keeps on giving. So that's the flip of the perspective here, right? Adar is this month where we were so lucky, quote unquote, to get this extraordinary person who was once in all of history. He was born on that day. The fact that he died doesn't stop all of the gifts that he gave, right? You might even say that this is a little bit of a kind of a little anti-Christian polemic. The death here is not the crucial historical moment of change, right? It's the fact that the guy lived and did what he did. Geraldine.
Isn't that the reason why we like the yahrzeit light on the day the person died? Because we know what kind of a good life he lived.
Absolutely, right. What do we say? We say, let that memory always be a source of blessing, right? The life is the gift.
Matters.
Yeah. When we have certainly in more mystical traditional communities, the day that a righteous person dies is considered a celebration. It's a hilula. So, for instance, Lag BaOmer this past year was a terrible story that happened, but it's based on the idea that people celebrate that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai died on Lag BaOmer because that's great. He died on Lag BaOmer. He had this amazing life. He brought all this Torah down into the world, and then he went up to heaven to join the other righteous people. It's a good thing. It's a fulfillment, right?
Except that Moses was denied the opportunity to enter the Holy Land.
That's correct.
By his death.
And we're not dealing with why he wasn't led into the Holy Land. That you'll have to come to Torah study.
No, I didn't ask why. I know why. I'm saying the fact that he was denied the opportunity.
No, not that many people know why. There's such a conversation about why.
Right, but I'm not addressing that. I'm addressing the fact that he was denied the opportunity to enter the Holy Land means that his death for him was a misfortune. I mean, he was going to die, but God specifically said, I will cause you to die before you enter the Holy Land. That's all.
So Franz Rosenzweig said, in short, I'm paraphrasing. He says, the real reason why Moses didn't enter the promised land, didn't live to enter the promised land? What's the real reason? So we go through all these. He sinned this way, he did this, he did that, he did this. The real reason, said Franz Rosenzweig, is because he was human. Nobody lives to enter the promised lands that they have in front of them. All of us die before we've accomplished everything. There's no such thing as accomplishing everything. That's what it means to be a human being. That's what it means to be mortal. Did Moses want more? Yeah, he says, I asked God to let me in, but God wouldn't let me. Right? But in the end, what was his feeling? Did he feel that he was being punished, or did he feel that he was taken? That he was being taken into God's bosom as God's beloved, faithful servant? So that's, like I say, that's why we're not going to talk about that, because it's a lot to talk about. But the idea that his life was, we just read it a few days ago, right? Nobody was like Moses. Lo kam b'Yisrael k'Moshe, right? Moses did unbelievable things to the, in the eyes of the entire Jewish people. Who could compare to Moses? So it's the life in the end that overrules the death.
Life is more important than death.
Okay, so let's now go into Haman's argument to Achashverosh. He decides he has to get permission from Achashverosh to destroy the Jewish people. he's convinced that that's what he wants to do, and he has to get the king's approval. So he puts out an argument to persuade Achashverosh. Look at note 44, please.
Note 44 from Esther 3:8. The verse in its entirety reads, "And Haman said to King Achashverosh, there is a certain nation scattered abroad and dispersed among the nations in all the provinces of your kingdom. And their laws are different from all the other nations, and they do not observe the king's laws, and it is of no benefit to the king to tolerate them."
Right. Notice he hasn't yet mentioned who they are.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to unpack this this set of phrases.
The Megillah continues that Haman said to Ahasuerus, there is a certain nation. Rava expounded this verse. Rava said, there was no one who knew how to slander as skillfully as Haman. For Haman said to Ahasuerus, come, let us destroy the Jews. Ahasuerus replied to him, I am afraid of their God, that he should not do to me as he did to my predecessors. Haman said to Ahasuerus, they have been negligent in their observance of the mitzvot, and their God will therefore not punish you for harming them. Ahasuerus answered him, there are the rabbis among them who do keep the mitzvot.
Okay, so before we just continue, there's a play on words. It's mentioned in the notes. The Hebrew is yeshno am echad. There is a certain people. So what the play on words is that they read it not yeshno am echad, but yashnu. That certain people has fallen asleep at the wheel. They're supposed to be serving God, and they've been negligent. They're not really doing God's bidding. So therefore, you don't have to worry about God protecting them anymore. Don't worry that God will punish you for mistreating them. God's finished with them. God's not going to have anything more to do with them because yashnu amechat. This people has given up their responsibility to serve God. They've fallen asleep. Okay, so then Achashverosh says, well, but the rabbis are still loyal to God. So go ahead. No, you're on mute.
Again, an accident. A coincidence?
There are no accidents. That's part of this whole thing.
Coincidence? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Haman said to Ahasuerus, they are one nation. Haman continued, perhaps you will say
what does that mean? They are one nation.
That the fact that the rabbis, this is my take on it, the fact that the rabbis kept the mitzvot doesn't absolve the whole people of a negative judgment.
So let's read note 47.
Note 47. The rabbis are just like the rest of the nation. They too do not keep the mitzvot. That's Maharsha's take. Alternatively, even if the rabbis keep the mitzvot, the nation of Israel is one. That is, they are all responsible for each other. Yeah, Kol Yisrael Aravim. Arevim. I can't read the little stuff. I'm sorry. I have a magnifying glass. It doesn't seem to help. And the rabbis are therefore deserving of punishment as well. This is what Haman meant when he said Am Echad, one nation.
Right. There used to be a UJA Federation motto, right? We are one.
Yeah.
It was supposed to advocate for unity of the whole Jewish people. Yeah. So Josie.
Well, I used to work for Federation, and the motto we liked was "It's always something."
You stole that from my Gentile grandmother.
Right.
Yeah.
Always something. Very good. Okay, but
what
we have.
I wanted to say on a more serious note is this charge. There is a people who keep themselves separate and don't, really follow our government. That's been used against the Jews for centuries.
Right. So don't jump. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that phrase too. Yes. And there's absolutely all of these phrases are so relevant. They're classic.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that this speech is written 2,400 years ago.
Years ago.
But again, I just want to about the place of the rabbis in this. So you have two different suggestions in that note.
Mhm.
One is Achashverosh is saying, wait, but what about the rabbis? And Haman says they're just as bad as the rest of the people. They're also no good. They're also betraying God and not doing what they're supposed to do. So that's an interesting thing. Is he saying that out of any knowledge? Is he saying that is there any truth to what he possibly could say? I mean, here's Maharsha. Maharsha is one of the great commentators on the Talmud, and he's putting these words in Haman's mouth. Is this supposed to be a slander that has no basis in fact? Is this supposed to be a portrait of the sad situation of the rabbinic culture at that moment? It's hard to tell. It's just there for us to think about. But one thing to say that I'm thinking of that sort of bridges between the two explanations. The second explanation says the rabbis can be as faithful as they want. They can be as learned as they want. They can be as pious as they want. But nevertheless, they're not separate from the rest of the people. They are part of the people. They are one people. So if the entire people overall is failing to serve God, then the fact that these rabbis are very, very conscientious and pious and so on doesn't cut it. So this is complicated, and this is a difficult kind of argument. Remember, this is the opposite of Abraham's argument with Sodom.
Yeah.
In Abraham's argument with Sodom, Abraham says, okay, so they're all miserable serial murderers. But if there are 10 good people there, so at least, spare the whole city for the sake of the fact that there are a few righteous people still within them, right? Here, it's the opposite, right? Here, it's the righteous, forget it. They don't count anymore if the rest of the people are no good. They're just going to be held responsible. So one way to say it is they're held responsible because why aren't they being more effective? Why aren't they having an influence on the people? Why can't they change the people to be more conscientious and more serious and more committed, right? So that's their fault. That's one way to read it. Geraldine.
We say al-chait in the plural, but we have an out that if we pray and we give tzedakah and we do good things, that will be forgiven. Right. So that balances it, doesn't it?
Right. So that's a good point. When we say the confessionals of the sins, we don't say only the sins that apply to each of us personally. We say we're all in this together. We are all one people. We all did these terrible things. David, you raising your hand? No, you're just stretching. Okay, I got it. So that would be one way. Sylvia.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was just going to say that basically it's saying what you're saying before, which is that rabbis are humans. And by being a human, we accept the fact that we have failings that make us less than perfect.
Right. So that's, if you prick us, do we not bleed? We're just as human as every other Jew. So that's true. Absolutely. So that's part of it too. What I would also suggest is that, well, a few things. There's a zillion things running around in my mind. One of the things, as I mentioned before, the Martyrology. The Martyrology was about taking out on the rabbis the sins of the Jewish people. Right? The mythic story is because the brothers sold Joseph down the river, literally, and they were never called to account for that. That guilt has to be borne by somebody. Who bears the guilt in the end? The leaders. The buck stops there. So the leadership, which from the rabbi's perspective is the rabbis themselves, the rabbis have to take responsibility because it's happening under their watch. It's happening under under their leadership. The other thing is kind of a mix of the two, is leaders can be greater or less great depending on the people they're leading. If the relationship between the leader and the people is a constructive relationship, the people can give an energy and an inspiration to the leaders to be greater than what they would be on their own, which is what a community is supposed to be altogether. A community is supposed to have a power in that collective that transcends any individual person and is greater than any individual person. And I've said it many times, Shomrei does certain things as a community that as individuals we couldn't do. We feed the homeless, right? This week we're starting up again with mesh. I don't cook meals for the homeless on a regular basis as an individual, but then as a community, Shomrei has been able to do this for years. So there's a certain strength that comes from that community. So no matter how good a person, a leader is, righteous or not, to be a leader depends also on who the followers are. How much cooperation, how much support, how much push happens, with the mass that the leader is supposed to be leading. I mean, I just saw in the headline this morning, this is going to be a big question with Biden, right? Is Biden going to get the support that will push him to be the greatest leader that he can possibly be? The man is basically a mensch, from my perspective. Thank God, we finally have a mensch sitting in the Oval Office. He's a mensch, but how successful is he going to be as a leader? So that leadership question, and what he feels is safe for him to advocate. What does he feel is doable? If he doesn't feel something is doable, he's not going to do it. And if he can't do it because he can't get the support, then his record at the end of the at the end of the day is going to be, well, he was a nice guy, but he really didn't accomplish all that much, or he didn't accomplish the things that had to be accomplished. So we are one people. Our leaders depend on the people themselves to be as good a leader as they can possibly be. All right. So let's go a little bit further. So Haman said to Achashverosh, they are one nation. Got it? You're on mute again. Bill, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, it just keeps doing it.
All right.
Maybe it's my fault, but anyway. Haman said to Achashverosh, they are one nation. Haman continued, perhaps you will say that by killing out the Jews, I will make a bald spot in your kingdom. That is, one section of your kingdom will be depopulated. That is not the case, for they are scattered abroad among the nations. Perhaps you will say that there is some benefit that can be gotten from them, so that it is unprofitable to destroy them. This is not the case, for meforad, they are like the mule, which does not bear fruit. They do not produce anything worthwhile. And perhaps you will say that a small province is made up of them, so you do not wish to destroy one of your provinces by destroying them. The verse teaches that Haman replied to this, that the Jews are in all the provinces of your kingdom.
Okay. So what kind of arguments do we have here? Right. These are very, very much practical, transactional kinds of issues. What's in it for me? What if we get rid of the Jews, do we lose anything? What's the downside? Right? This is like the obscenity of this conversation, right? Well, if there's no downside, then I guess we can destroy them. But maybe there is a downside. So, we should be careful. Let's think this through. Let's think about destroying these human beings, make sure that we're not going to end up losing a few things that we don't want to lose, right? So that's the chilling kind of discussion here. What's the political fallout? What's the complexion going to be of the overall empire? Are we gonna be sorry afterwards that we did this? No, nothing about the value of human life, nothing about right or wrong. Very, very much a practical kind of way. Okay, we're going to stop here. As I said before, next week we are on break again. I'll be away, and then we resume, God willing, the following week. So I look forward to seeing everybody again in 2 Sundays. Yes, Sylvia.
Did you send out the next set of pages?